keep finding ways that we're helping partners finding either, balance in their life or focus or purpose.
Practices that are going to help improve your project management skills or your finances.
We're here to talk about setting long-term goals and then how to achieve them.
Increasing your quality, therefore becoming the best place in town to work.
Welcome to Academy Live. Well, I have no idea why my camera is looking like this, everyone, so we're going to try to fix it soon, but I'll still give the introduction. So welcome to Academy Live. MSPs who are successful, they leverage their tools to increase automation and efficiency in their businesses to create those economies of scale that make MSPs so successful. Today, we'll be diving in how you can leverage your tools. And you have a lot of tools, from your PSA to your RMM to your documentation tool, your password manager, your backup management, patch management. There's just many tools that you're using. Today on Academy Live, we'll talk about how you can leverage those tools to make an impact on your business with our guest, Executive Coach Jonathan Mack. We'll also be speaking to Johnathan Cox, Manager of Operations Solutions at Pax8, so you can learn more about the operations tools you use that you do not want to be sleeping on. First, Chris, you have some exciting news to share with us.
I do. I'd never thought I'd hear myself be this excited about it, or that I would ever say this, but I am a grandfather. Very proud grandfather. This is something that's just great news, huge change in our life. Things have been amazing. And I feel very blessed and fortunate. And I have some pictures to share with us. If you don't mind bringing those up, I'd love to share. This is Hadley Grace. And so, I'm going to be that proud grandfather that's going to carry around pictures. Hey, have you seen? Let me show you pictures of my granddaughter. I just know that's what I'm going to be and what it's going to look like. But it's just the sweetest little button nose. That's me, of course, representing the Pax8, but just holding her, looking at her eyes, talking to her. It's amazing what that feels like, and I'm just thrilled to kind of share that with everybody. So I appreciate you kind of letting me take this moment and kind of bask in this and kind of share some of my, just happiness, this joy, this little brand new addition to the world has brought. So Hadley Grace, welcome to the world. Welcome to your premiere appearance on Pax8 Academy Live. So someday you'll be able to look back on that and kind of enjoy that. But thank you for letting me share that. Again, I'm sure I'll be collecting and sharing pictures everywhere I go. But I'd like to just jump in and bring on our first guest, Jonathan Mack. Please welcome to Pax8 Academy Live. How are you doing today? Oh yeah. Sorry. This is something you just kind of have to roll with on how we do things. So it is what it is. I'll blame it on Grandpa Brain. That's what I'll blame it on. Is just me transitioning into being a grandfather and what what that's like. I will share, all the common things that people will tell you. Things like, if I would have known how great it was, I would have had grandkids first and not had kids first. The other thing about that joy of being able to go in, and I just had recently where I did that exact thing of walking down and going to my daughter-in-law and say, give me baby, taking a baby,
all right,
and walking around and just enjoying a time.
I don't know what happened.
And then, being able to kind of share in that moment. But then as soon as there's fussiness or she needs to be changed or needs a bottle or something like that, being able to just hand her back and say, here you go, take baby. That is a very powerful experience as well. And it's just that's so much fun. So if you ever want to ask me about it, happy to share that experience. I know there's other people here that have been on the show that can empathize with this experience. nobody can prepare you for it. All these things you say it's going to be like, but until you experience it, it's just something very, very powerful. And that bond of parenthood and grandparenthood is really an amazing thing. But hopefully enough about that for now. I'm sure we'll revisit that some point in the future. I would now love to bring on our first guest, Johnathan Mack, Executive Coach, Pax8. Welcome to Pax8 Academy Live, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chris. And congratulations on the new addition to the family.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll share
a little bit about me.
Together, I'll share pictures. With it, we make changes, and every day things come at us and we just adjust and change. But I'd like to invite you to do what we call kind of a humble brag. Would you tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, sure. So I'm Johnathan Mack. I'm a senior executive coach with Pax8 Academy. A humble brag. Well, my goal, my why is to see people be successful and know that I was part of that journey and their success. And as an academy coach, I get to do that every day. And to be able to sit with partners and clients and work with them in small groups and one-on-one scenarios, and to be able to hear their challenges and their problems and concerns, and be able to contribute into progression forward and helping people be successful. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's what I love to do. And I suppose the humble brag is that I see success in that. I'm able to do that. And it's just really gratifying when I have a conversation with a partner, whether it's on a call or I get to meet them in person, and I just get this really big thank you. Right? You've been an amazing part of our journey, and we couldn't have done it without you. That's really, really satisfying.
That's awesome. Just watching you interact with others in groups, you have such a wealth of knowledge. Tell us a little bit about your security focus. I know we've had conversations, and
sure.
How did that interest develop? And tell us a little about your security focus.
Okay. So I spent the better part of 20 years in the MSP space, working as a partner. And the last couple of years that I was in that space, I was able to develop the security practice for that particular MSP. Security has always been something that has been an interest to me. I've always been a bit of a fair freak, black, white, right, wrong. And so being on the security side really allowed me to delve into that binary space of black hat, white hat. So that's how it started. And then I just kept going into it and further. And I've always enjoyed the troubleshooting and the investigation, the forensic aspect of life, we'll call it, right? And security was a great vehicle for that.
That makes sense. And being in the trenches, so to speak, and firsthand, like what are those insurance commercials? We know a lot because we've seen a lot. I'm sure that's helped kind of as you develop that. I want to jump into every week we do a quote, and we ask our guests to bring a quote. So can we pull up that quote on the screen? Jonathan, I'd love to have you read us the quote and tell us, why that quote and why that was significant to you. It's something we kind of like to introduce or have people talk about.
Sure. Yeah. So the quote is, it almost doesn't matter what you improve as long as you're improving something. This quote comes from the book entitled The Phoenix Project, which is quite a popular book in the MSP space. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. Lots of lessons to be learned. However, right, the quote in specific is speaking to iterative improvement. And this works either operationally or it works within security. It frankly works in your life. Right? Choose something to improve and go chase after it. So whether that's you want to just be a little bit more secure next month than you are this month, or you want to do something a little bit better in your business operationally next week compared to today, it almost really doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something.
That really resonates with me. And by the way, I do love that book. The Phoenix Project is good. It's where I learned about constraints, and that was really powerful. But to the improvement, I love the Japanese expression of Kaizen. Just that about those constant small changes that are cumulative, and it's maybe not about making a huge, massive project, but all these little things. There's always something to do to improve. Like you said, be better today than yesterday. Next week, be better the next week than we were this week, etc. So it really resonates. I love that. So give us a little preview. Tell us what you're going to be talking about today.
Well, today we're going to be talking about process and tools and how they work together when a tool makes sense, maybe when a tool doesn't make sense. We're going to be talking about using tools for that iterative improvement as well. And so when we talk about tools, right, tools are really important in our business. And we hear a lot about tools. And I mean, we're Pax8, so that's what we talk a lot about, and we focus a lot in on tools. Now, tools without good process behind aren't going to be as effective as just a tool standalone. So when we speak to iterative improvement, right, it almost doesn't matter what you improve as long as you're improving something. We look at a process first. Define, develop, institute, right, train, inspect the process. And once that's in a good spot, how can we use a tool to help make it even more efficient? So as an example, we'll choose a really, really common example that we speak to partners about fairly commonly. Workstation deployments. The MSP space does a lot of workstation deployments. I would expect, would hope that as an MSP and as the MSP, as the organization grows and becomes more mature, that we put a checklist behind that workstation deployment. Do this, do this, do this, then do that, then do that, then do that, then do this, then do that, right? So that we're consistent and predictable in deploying that workstation. Great. I've seen some data points where doing workstations by hand takes upwards of 3 or 4 hours. Said and done. Yikes, right? That's quite a bit of time that our techs and engineers could be spending doing some other things. And so this is where then we talk about, well, what could we automate here? And one of the biggest, most often mistakes that I see in this space is that there's this objective or goal to automate the whole entire thing all at once. And I'm going to take that 4 hours and I'm going to turn it into 30 minutes all at once. And it's this like boil the ocean mentality that we just can't do. So, right, take your tool that you're looking at, that you desire to use, whether it's right an Intune, right, or some other automation tool, and pick one thing on your checklist or 2 things off of your checklist. So I'm going to automate those ones.
Mm-hmm.
Go chase after that. Chase after that automation. Shave off that 15 minutes or that 20 minutes with those couple of things. Once you succeed in getting those ones, pick 2 more things or 3 more things and automate those ones, and so on and so forth. And eventually you'll get to that time frame that you're shooting for.
That's a great example, because I think I agree, and I think it leads to a lot of frustration. Why are we not? It's an unrealistic target of going from 4 hours to 30 minutes over, just in one fell swoop, and I think that leads to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
frustration. Something else I want to lean into, something you said, is I think um, tools without process, right? I think you've
Mm-hmm.
probably seen it. I know I've seen it a lot, in peer groups or on experience, where partners or people will grab on a tool because it's going to fix all these things, not build a lot of process around it, and dive into implementing a tool expecting it to do certain things without the process behind it. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach that and how you help partners to kind of pair processes with their tools to leverage them more
Yeah.
effectively?
Can we bring up slide number 1
Yeah,
and see if we can't visualize this a little bit?
I like this. Yeah, this is
So,
good.
yeah, the quote might be a little bit hard to see for some of our viewers. Right, it's a Bill Gates quote, and it says the first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify. Sorry, that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. And the second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So if we go back to our workstation deployment, if you don't have a checklist already in place, right, some sort of documented process as to how you're going to deploy workstations, and you just go buy a tool and hope that it works, you are going to magnify that inefficiency because you won't know where to a tool to. Right, so working with bad systems, working without process, we still have a wheel, and it's going to be a bumpy ride, right? The wheel on the left. Whereas working with great processes, that wheel is going to be much more round and it's going to roll much more smoothly. A good process will work with a minimal amount of tools. The tool is there to magnify the efficiency and make that process quicker and smoother.
It's amazing how, and I'm sure I'd love to know if you can give an example of that to illustrate, but I think people kind of get that. And I think you're very quick to bring in a tool without the process. So do you, and I'm throwing you, right under the bus, but can you give an example of, um, you know, maybe an implementation or a use of a tool and an inefficient thing that did not work well and one that did?
I can certainly give one from not only my own experience, but from experiences of other partners that I've witnessed. So, right, I certainly am guilty of this. Right, I wander through a vendor pavilion at a show. This sounds pretty neat, whatever it is that I'm being spoken to about, and sign me up. Right, this sounds great. And I go back to the office and I download this thing and I install it and I connect it into my PSA and I turn it on. And in the next 2 hours, I've got 3,000 tickets that just flooded their way in. Right? I didn't give any thought to configuring this tool. I didn't give any thought to the consequences of what I was doing. I just was like, this looks like it's going to be fun. And turns out 3,000, 4,000, however many thousands of tickets later, it's not any fun. Right. So there is so much more that needs to go behind, so much more thought that needs to go behind acquiring, installing, configuring tools. For example, how am I going to learn about this tool? How is my team going to learn about this tool? How much does this tool really cost? What am I going to do with that cost? Am I going to absorb it? Am I passing it on to my client? Right? How much time is it going to take to install this tool? How much time will it take to maintain the tool? How much time is this tool going to consume on a reactive level? My 3,000 tickets that I need to do something with. Does my team know how to use this tool? Do they know how to use it effectively? The Reddits and the Discords and the Facebooks, right? I often see, hey, I don't like my PSA anymore. I'm going to go get a different PSA. What do you guys think? Right? I hear this one's better. This one's better than that one. 99 times out of 100. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. It's not the tool. That's the problem, right? It's how the tool is being used, right? There's no process behind the PSA.
That comes up a lot in peer groups, and we do find people chasing tools to solve the problem. Would you agree that a lot of times it's not taking time to understand what the issue they're solving for, or what the tool really does, or how it fits? It's just drawing a line between two dots and not really seeing that maybe they don't always connect or in the way that they do. Would you agree that's a common problem with that?
Absolutely. Right. Question number one, when going down the path of researching tools, whatever the tool may happen to be, what's the problem that you are trying to solve? Right. And having that very well defined and clear. What problem is it I'm trying to solve? And typically, or ideally, it's a business problem that you're trying to solve, not necessarily a technical problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you said something else that stuck with me too, which was the expectations. Hey, Bessie, welcome back. Good to see you. But talk a little bit about how do we, set expectations, like not just with us implementing it or choosing to bring that into the business, but also with the team or with clients. Talk about some of your experience about just level setting even before implementing.
Yeah. So, for example, we'll take what am I going to do? Right. This tool costs me a couple bucks per endpoint, couple bucks per user. Right. Pretty enticing. That doesn't sound like an awful lot of money. Right? What's a couple dollars per endpoint? Well, what are we going to do with that couple dollars? Right? Can I go to my client and say, hey, by the way, like, we're charging you X amount of dollars per month. Now I need to charge you Y amount of dollars per month because I've added something to my tool stack. Well, that's also, like, we got to put margin on that, $2. Plus we need to add some labor because that tool isn't just going to take care of itself and just run on its own, right? It's going to need some nurturing and some attention. So now suddenly that $2 per month is probably turning into somewhere like $6, $7, $8, right? If we add some labor onto it. And that's likely to garner some attention, right? If you go into the client, say, hey, we're giving you this increase of, $7, $6, $7, $8 per month. Right. So we need to also be able to justify to the client the relevance of this tool and what it's going to do for them. Right. And so we talk a lot in Pax8 about growing the business and finding efficiencies in the business and reducing risk in the business. And so you need to be able to speak to your tools, being able to do one or multiples of those things at the client side. And that's typically the thing that you're chasing after internally as well. at the MSP, right? If I sign up for this PSA versus that PSA, which one of these is going to be able to help me better grow my business, find efficiencies in my business, and reduce risk in my business?
And those are our main value drivers that we talk about a lot at Pax8. I really want to focus in on that. How do we solve these inefficiencies in the business? Can you speak to that, Jonathan, a little bit more around major inefficiencies that partners may have in their businesses, and maybe what tools are out there to help them solve those problems?
Sure. So I'd say the most common inefficiency that I see on the partner side is the application of manual labor to do things that automation, scripting, it could take care of for us. And the irony is, it's very likely that the MSP already has the tool at hand that they need. They're just not using it the way that they could. So I'm going to tell a little story. I'm going to tell a fable here. The fable of the two woodcutters. So we have two woodcutters, and they're competing to see who can cut the most wood in a day. And we'll say Bob and Fred. We'll use those as names. So Bob and Fred go out into the woods at 8 in the morning, and they're going to compete all day long. And whoever has the most wood at the end of the day, cut up, wins. And so Bob and Fred, they start and they're swinging away, and Bob's swinging away, and then he hears Fred stop. He doesn't hear Fred cutting wood anymore. And Bob's like, perfect, I got this thing in the bag. 15 minutes later, he hears Fred swinging. He's like, oh yeah, no problem. An hour later, same thing, right? Fred doesn't hear Fred anymore. And this goes on through the whole day, right? Every hour for 15 minutes, Bob can't hear Fred cutting wood anymore. And at the end of the day, they go and they compare, and Fred has more wood. And he's like, Bob's thinking, how is this possible? How you stopped every hour for 15 minutes? How did you do this? And Fred says, yeah, that 15 minutes when you didn't hear me cutting wood, I was sharpening my axe. So how are we sharpening our axes? Meaning, how are we, or how much time are we spending with the tools that we already have and using them better, making them better? Right? Do we install the RMM and just leave it be, never to be touched again for the next 4 or 5 years? Right? Or are we devoting some time to care and nurture and leverage and become better? Right? It almost doesn't matter what you improve with your RMM, as long as you're improving something. And so, right, sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. And that might mean that your NOC chief or whoever is responsible for your automation or your tools needs to take some time. And when I say time, I'm not talking 15 minutes, I'm talking hours and days, right? To step back, evaluate what's going on, right? And how it could be better. Sometimes, or one way that you can do this is you can go into your PSA and see where the volume of alerts is coming from and what they specifically are, and go, okay, that's going to be my focus. I get 1,000 of these in a month. Right? I'm going to find a way to use my RMM to automate these alerts so that they self-heal. So a tech or an engineer doesn't have to do this.
Now, it's kind of a two-part question. One is, the first part is, did you in your own business build in processes to do that? Did you build in like scheduled time or build out a process to go look at ways to optimize? And then the second part of the question is, What are some of the easiest things to streamline? What are some of the low hanging fruits that some of our partners should really be evaluating to get the most benefit?
Okay. So I'm not too prideful to admit that at the beginning, no, I did not build any time in. That's one of the advantages of a coach that we're able to say is, right, I may not have the right answer for you, but I can certainly tell you what not to do. Right? Don't do it this way. That just leads to heartache and sorrow. So, but as I progressed along in my MSP career and journey, we most certainly did build the time in, all the way down to recurring tickets in the calendar. Right? Tuesday afternoon is your time, or whatever it is that you may happen to choose. So there's that's wise advice, right? Is to schedule time and to step back and do that evaluation. Some of the low hanging fruit, it's the things, the tedious, mundane things, the patching, the disk defragmentation, the volume full because of log files. These are things that can easily be automated to take care of themselves. For example, right, the volume full scenario. When a volume fills up, right, really bad things can happen. Right, this turns into a P1 in a real hurry when the server drops. So let's use the automation to catch that before it becomes the P1 and the emergency hair on fire and all hands on deck. So those are some examples of really simple things that can be taken care of. Patching is a really interesting one, because patching tends to require a lot of nurturing and feeding, even on the RMM side when you've got it automated. But getting 90% of the way there with your tools and having to fill in manually the other 10% is a whole lot better than getting 40% of the way or 20% of the way there and doing the other aspects at 80%. Backup checks is another one, right? Those can be automated. Backup checks is something that we really like to talk about managing by exception. And so, right, you use your tools to help you surface the exceptions. So with backups, we're looking for notification of success, notification of failure, and lack of notification at all. Well, you can use your tools to help you surface that lack of notification.
Like that managed by exception is powerful too, because it's easy to get caught in the weeds with a lot of these things. I want to switch gears just a little bit real quick and talk a little bit about predictive index. We had an experience recently that I think it's kind of fun to share. I love seeing the smile on your face, because I think identifying people on your team that are a good fit to do this, having the right people in the spot. You are such the right person for that, because tell us a little bit about first of all, so predictive index is kind of a personality assessment. We use it at Pax8 a lot, and it helps us understand each other a lot better. Jonathan, share a little bit about some of your predictive index traits and how they've led to some of your success in process.
Okay, so a little bit of predictive index backstory here. Last week, we had the privilege to meet as an entire academy team in person. And how many of us is there now? Probably, I mean, the better part of 50,
35.
40
Oh,
some
well,
odd,
yeah.
something like that. And there's a trait that I have that's almost off the charts compared to the rest of the academy team, and that is the need for structure. And so we physically lined ourselves up in this room, and from the lowest individual the individual who requires structure the least to the most, and it wasn't even close. Like I might as well have been out in the hallway compared to the
Need another
next
room.
person. Yeah, compared to the next person. So, right, my personality requires a great deal of structure. That makes me a very logical individual. It makes me, again, very binary, right? One, zero, right, wrong. And so, yeah, when I go chase after a problem, for example, say a tool or an automation, right? That's what I'm seeking after, is to put structure to the problem, right? Let's put a framework around this thing and let's processize it so that it's going to be the same every single time. And I thrive in that space. Like,
And
sign me up.
there's a fun moment too where there's on the most extreme level of extroversion was none other than me, Chris, and Rex, just
And Rex.
at the very end of the room
Rex.
together. Well, Jonathan, I want to end your session with some structure, since we've had a little bit of a fun time on Academy Live with our things thrown at us that we're not expecting. But we put together some of these charts with growth stages, looking at specific ways that partners can leverage their tool and looking at them through stages, growth stage 1 through 4. So can we pull up that first one, Willis, and take a look at it and maybe make it full screen so we can see it a little bit better? Thank you. So Jonathan, taking a look at effectiveness of RMM tool, is there anything that you really want to shout out here around how that looks different at different growth stages?
Yes, but more, I'd want to shout out, your objective is always to be trying to move from the stage that you're in to the next stage, right? So everybody has an RMM, or at the very least, everybody has access to an RMM, right? If you wanted to buy one, you could. And there's at least a half a dozen of them out there. And so, right, stage 1, that's when you go buy the RMM, you install it, you turn it on, and you flood yourself with thousands of tickets, right? The alerts are out of control, and we have no idea what's going on there. So take the time, sharpen the axe, right, so that you can move from stage 1 establishment to stage 2 enablement. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you need to go into your RMM, and if you can, because not all of them have this functionality, but if you can, right, you want to set your alerts such that you decide on what the priority is when the alert gets created, right? Is it a P1, 2, 3, or 4? As an example, you can decide what board it's going to go on. Right? We coach to having 3 RMM boards. One for critical alerts, which need to be solved right now. Those are P1s. One for urgent alerts. Those are typically P2s. It means imminent danger, right? If you don't take care of this, then something bad is going to happen in the next couple of days. And the third one is for monitoring alerts, things that you don't even really need to look at. Ideally, those are actually the things that the RMM is self-healing. So if you can get that configured, take the time to do it, that's going to move you from 1 to 2 pretty quickly. And so, right, then once you're there, right, work to move yourself from 2 to 3. Take a look at those things and those checklists for those workstation deployments. Okay, what part of this could I script? What part of this could I automate? right? Move yourself from 2 to 3.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that advice. I think we maybe have time for one or two more. Do you mind bringing up another one, Willis? Looking at client password management was the next one that we pulled up here.
Sure.
Thinking of that,
Yeah.
that same advice, but what? Yeah, anything to add here?
Yeah. So this is an interesting kind of angle because we didn't talk about this angle an awful lot. This is one of those where you could use a tool to help you manage the exceptions. So you go into your client and you're like, hey, we need to institute a strong password policy. From a security perspective, right? This is called locking the front door, right? Basic blocking and tackling. Right? You sit down with your point of contact and they say, sounds great, let's do this. Oh, except for the CEO. That wouldn't go well. We're going to leave them
We do not
alone.
advise that.
No. I'm just
Of all
sharing
people.
some personal experience. Right? I'm hoping that there's some people that nodded their head. Yeah, I know. How do I overcome that? Right? You can use your tools to help audit, right? Your GRC, your government risk and compliance. You can use your tools to help you identify where things are out of compliance. In this particular case, given this slide, we're going to move from coding passwords in Excel spreadsheet notes to using a password manager, right? To move from establishment to enablement. And ideally, in that stage 3-4 space, we're moving to single sign-on solutions, right? Multi-factor authentication solutions. Again, more tools to help us move along that journey.
Excellent. Well, I think that's really what we had time for. Jonathan, is there any last thoughts you want to leave us with before we move on with the show?
Yeah, it would just summarize or to reiterate, when you're tools, thinking of tools, go deeper into that thought process around, right, what's this going to take? What problem am I trying to solve, and what's it going to take to solve it? Right? The time to onboard, the time to maintain, the reactive time that's going to happen here, the cost, who's paying for it, etc. Just absolutely critical to be thinking broader than just the technical aspect of it.
Good stuff.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank
We
you so
appreciate
much
your
for
insight.
joining.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Have a great rest of your day. Bessie, you have
Thank
something special for us, right, to share?
Yes, let's take a look at the marketplace. So you can pull that up. If you go to pax8.com/marketplace, you're going to see all of the many tools that Pax8 has in our marketplace. And so here you can search for a specific vendor, or you can browse the vendors by category. So you can take a look at communications, continuity, infrastructure, integrations, network, operations, productivity, and security. So if you haven't done so yet, I highly recommend taking a look at that Pax8 Beyond or pax8.com/marketplace to take a look at all the amazing tools that we have available to you. And so our next guest we want to bring on, because he is well aware of, he is a manager of operations solutions. So he's very, very knowledgeable about a lot of those tools in the operations area. I'm sure he could speak well to many other tools as well. But if we could, I'd love to bring on Johnathan Cox.
Awesome.
Welcome,
Thanks,
Jonathan.
Bessie. Chris, appreciate y'all having me on. A long-time listener, first-time caller. So thanks for the invite today. Yeah, I'm Johnathan Cox. I manage our operations solutions consultants here at Pax8. kind of an interesting category that we're in, right? Our partners have a whole lot of resources at their disposal when they partner up with Pax8. So there's a channel account manager that's kind of their central hub or their quarterback, and then you've got productivity, infrastructure, continuity for like the backups that Jonathan Mack was talking about, security for your cybersecurity needs, and then you have us over here in another corner with operations, and we're looking more towards, internally within the MSP, what are the tools, the services, the things that you need to be paying attention to in order to make yourself, more efficient, more profitable, and to, help reduce your risk internally as you go forward. So when we look at those value drivers as Pax8, our team looks at them specifically toward, okay, with the MSP, how are you doing that internally, and then providing a better service to your clients. So that's really the space that we sit and the team that I manage.
Excellent. And how long have you been at Pax8 now?
So, funny story actually. Came in 2020, had to leave. Unfortunately, was able to come back about a year later, but all in about 3 years. Been in the space a little while. I was at ConnectWise for about 7 years. So very familiar with the conversations around internal tooling, right? Kind of your basic PSA, RMM, CPQ documentation, and kind of just that general stack. But yeah, it's definitely been a fun ride over, call it the last decade in this space, and to see how things have changed, and just the hundreds of partners that I've been able to talk to about their internal operations, and now having a team that is really out to help with that on a day-to-day basis.
Well, let's tap into that. With your experience and your history in the industry, what would you say are some of the things our partners, what kind of tools that our MSPs or our partners should be looking at to help them gain efficiencies?
Sure. I mean, I think Jonathan Mack spoke really well to this. Most MSPs that you talk to, even your guys that are just starting out, your one-man shops, it's like, hey, what should I use as a PSA tool on Reddit? Well, that's, at the end of the day, when you look at it, that's your business operating center, right? You're going to be doing everything from marketing all the way to invoicing out of that tool. The big two out there are ConnectWise and Autotask, right? So those are probably the two most common that you run into. But then you have other players in the industry that are really coming up. You have Synchro out there. Halo PSA is another one that we're hearing about. And working at ConnectWise, it was this idea that, hey, there's some of these other main tools that we need to bring into one thing, right? And you've kind of seen that convergence within the industry where you have these PSA tools, RMM, CPQ. I know with ConnectWise it was ConnectWise Manage, and then LabTech got into that fold with the RMM tool, and then they purchased Quozal, rebranded it all, the ConnectWise stuff, and then kind of made it all work together. So I believe that they were probably the first to kind of combine all those three main tools together, and then you've seen the industry move that route. But you have that main kind of stack. And then beyond that, you have all the other things that become more and more important, right? When we start to look at priority, and you start to look at, and Jonathan Mack, I love that he brought up the book, The Phoenix Project, because it talks specifically about constraints and what to tackle first. So yeah, if you're starting out, obviously a PSA tool is key, right? You have to have at least some sort of screen sharing tool, right? Most people will hop right into an RMM tool, because then you can mass deploy and software and manage hundreds, thousands of computers in a multi-tenant way. So that's another huge advantage there. But to Jonathan's point, it's not about the tools as much as a lot of people like to make it out to be, right? Especially your ConnectWises and Autotasks and Kaseyas of the world, right? This tool is better than that tool that does this. And I had a partner one time tell me, yeah, every tool out there, they have their own brand of shitty, is basically what they said, right? You're going to deal with something bad with all of them, but it's more important to have those processes in place first so that you can automate and be repeatable. I think that was such a great call out by Jonathan on that. And it can't be understated, right? Because, if you go in and you buy something, it's not going to solve all your problems.
You have to know how to implement it and it makes sense for your business. Can you talk a little bit about what are the conversations that are happening between the operation solution consultants, your team members and partners to figure out how do they come to that, agreement around which is the right tool, what's going to work best for their business, and how can they implement it successfully? What's that like?
That is a really great question because I'm sure that the sales reps on the floor would love to sell our partners everything, right?
Right.
But to have a but the reality is to have a true partnership, you have to be looking out for the partner, and a lot of times you have to challenge, the way that they think, and then be willing to kind of be challenged back in those conversations. So one of the ways that we approach the conversation is we say, okay, well, Pax8, we purchased C-level operations, which has now been rebranded as Pax8 Academy. Well, C-level coming into it had all of these different focus areas, all this different data and metrics, right? So my team said, well, as we're having these conversations, we're going to steal, for lack of a better word, some of those best in class metrics from what was C-level. And we're going to bring those up just as basic blocking and tackling points, right? So when when an OSC jumps on a call with a partner, they're looking at things like, hey, look, what was your top line revenue from your services that you ran? What is your internal stack today? How is some of that going? What were your costs associated to providing those services, so we can understand where your service gross margin was at over the last year and how that stacks up against what best in class is. What's your tech to endpoint ratio, so we can look at what that is against best in class and say, hey, you should have the capacity to pull on, another client or two based on the fact that, you should be able to pull on another 400, 500, 600 endpoints against what best in class is. So we'll look at those, and then we'll look at some different focus areas with, documentation, change management. What are you doing there? Are these things you're paying attention to? It's nothing groundbreaking, but it is very basic blocking and tackling stuff that sometimes, an owner or a service delivery manager or a COO, as an example, they may not step back and have the time to really ask themselves those questions and to go through that thought process. It's just, hey, I got to put out the fire of the day or the 10 fires of the day. So that allows us to take a step back, understand, hey, these are best in class numbers. Where do you stack up? Are these questions that you're asking yourself? And then at the end of that, we can say, okay, I have a couple of recommendations for you. It might be something that is on the Pax8 line card, right? It may be a service that we offer, right? And sometimes it's, hey, we are best in class. Okay, well, what's the next step, right? What are your goals over the next 3 years, 5 years? What is the why? How can we help enable you to get there? And after we go through that call, or that we call it a consult, we'll take a step back and say, okay, well, this is what I view as the priority based on the other conversations that I've had with these hundreds of partners. What do you think, right? This is priority number one, I would say, to tackle that largest constraint that you told me about today, right? And we may get agreements there, and that's great. And if not, then we'll ask them what their opinion is. That's the easy part, though. Right? They may agree that that's the priority, but then it's a matter of, okay, now we get to the implementation of the tool. Now, Pax8,
Yeah.
we understand a lot about those vendors and what they offer for implementation. We can typically guide a little bit because we have that experience with those vendors. But a lot of it is internal stuff, right? It's, how do I get my people bought into this, right? And in coaching, talk a lot about the why, right? The why for the business, the why for the individual, the why for the tech. Why is the tech am I going to put in time, right? It has to be something for them and their why. And so we talk a lot about that, and that's honestly why a lot of times there may be a really good tool that we say this will fix it, right? But you have to implement it. Oh, you have trouble implementing tools? Let's dig deeper. What's the real problem here? Oh, you can't get your team bought in. Okay, now we got to go way deeper and understand the root of that. And typically we start to talk a little bit about coaching and bringing folks like Jonathan Mack into the fold because, again, like he said, structure, right? You have to have that structure. You have to have that discipline. And then you have to be able to articulate the why for the business as well as for your employees. And if you're whether that's a tool internally or if you're getting something and adding something to a client's agreement, they have to understand, okay, well, what are my positive business outcomes? What's the reason why I need to add this or that I'm paying for this additional service or tool that you're implementing?
Absolutely. And, one of the things I love that your team does is, having the conversation asking the questions, helping, like Jonathan Mack said, okay, what's behind this? Okay, you saw this at a trade show, you saw this, but really, what does it do? What's the reason? And I love that your team will work with partners to identify and ask questions and challenge and help them think through it rather than just, I want to buy this tool. Can you provide us any aha moments? Like, I'd love to hear if you can recall any of those where just on a call with a partner or walking through that whole process of evaluating and asking why you've seen kind of like a aha and a light bulb go off. Any stories you can share around that?
I've had a lot of those conversations personally. I've stepped back from most of them, but I did jump in for one of my reps recently on a call. You know, I think the biggest one, or the theme that comes up with a lot of these, is you'll get on calls where people think that they know it all and they have it all figured out, and that's fine. And with those, it's kind of like, okay, some of them I've ended that call early and said, you know what, if you're not open to this conversation, then, and you're not willing to to be curious and learn, then there's no point in us talking. That's not the vast majority of them, right? That's 1 in 100. The folks that jump on the call and basically say, yeah, you know what, I'm struggling with that. There's so many things that I haven't been able to sit down and really think about. And then at the end of the call, they thank you for just walking through that. And you have them asking like, hey, do you have this recording? Can you send this over? And we actually provide a deliverable to them that's actually pretty nice with everything that we talked about, that helps outline those priorities. But I think that's the standout that you'll see in, call it half the calls. You have the owner on the other end, or you have the COO on the other end, and they're just thankful that somebody's willing to take that time and walk through some of those questions and dig a little bit deeper, where it's not just another call where, oh great, I'm jumping on the call with a software distributor that's going to try to shove the next thing down my throat because they're getting comped this much money on it. We've really been intentional all the way through our hiring process, that we have the right people to speak to our partners in a way that challenges them, in a way that's helpful, in a way that's useful, in a way that, call it 50-60% of those calls, they jump off of that call saying, thank you. Can we do more of this? So I think that's, for me, that's kind of that, Jonathan Mack was talking about how he loves helping people and then watching them grow. I think for me, watching my entire team doing that and having that exponential effect on our partners is really so rewarding. And then I challenge them too. I'm like, you're going to see a lot of these partners at Pax8 Beyond, at other trade shows. You're going to see that those conversations that you had with them, they're going to be in a different growth stage the next time you do. And you're going to have been a part of that. And that means that you help not only them grow and them get to those goals that they talked about, but also you may have helped them hire in a rural area. You may have changed, exponentially more people's lives because you're sharing this information and you're helping them to build that business. Even if it's this much, you had a hand in that. And that's a huge, huge thing to wake up and come to work every day.
I love that. Jonathan, you've been an amazing guest. Do you have any last thing that we didn't get a chance to ask you about that you want to share? Any vendors you want to call out? Anything at all to wrap us up?
Yeah. So I would say, if I were to just to say, hey, what's really hot out there in the market and what's being implemented in the quick hits, there is one that comes to mind. I'll share it on here. It's an automation platform. It's called Roost. It's one that I would check out just because you can get that basic blocking, like the really quick hits on the constraints where you're going to buy yourself back a lot of time really quickly. I hesitated to say that, but it is something that you can get a lot of time back, and it is helpful. The other one that I would say is coaching. Coaching, I've talked to so many of our partners that it's just changed their business and it's changed their lives. It's one of those things where it's not an engagement where a coach comes in and says, well, here's all the list of things that are wrong. Here's what you need to fix. Here's the playbook, go forth and implement it. It's totally different than that. It's, hey, here's 87 different focus areas that we've identified that we know that these are important. What's the priority for you? And I give that into your entire C-suite, your entire executive team. All of you come back individually with these different answers. And then as a coach, I come in and I say, okay, well, in order to, this I think is the biggest constraint. This is what we should tackle first, right? We get agreements on that, and then we go through the buy-in process with your entire team. And I'm not a coach, so I'm saying but I'm not the one that does this. It would be like a Johnathan Mack. But it makes such an exponential difference in the business that no tool is going to, right? If you're looking for a quick hit and you can get something implemented, yeah, that's where like a Roost would come in. But if you really want to dig in, you have a coach come in, you have them identify those constraints with you, you have them work out an entire plan of what you were going to tackle, when we're going to tackle it, our timeline, and they're going to hold you accountable to all of those things, just like a personal trainer would. And that growth in your business, it's there's nothing else like it. And I can say that because I've talked to so many partners that have been through it, and it's just changed their business, changed their lives, changed their employees' lives. And then you can start layering on, the automations, right? Like the Roost. Okay, that focus area that we talked about, we built that process that Johnathan Mack was talking about. Now let's pour gas on the fire and throw that automation in there. Now we're talking exponential growth, both the top line and bottom line, right? Our service gross margin is going to be through the roof at that point. So
amazing. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for being on the show. And we're going to move to final thoughts.
So, Bessie, I kind of wanted to hear, what comes to mind or top of the mind when you've listened to the Johnathan and Jonathan show.
Yeah, there's so much. There's so many good takeaways. I think we called this leverage your tools. We learned it's not all about the tools, right? It's about the process. And there's a lot of things that you can do in your business to make those small changes. One thing I do want to leave everyone with that I talk about on stage a lot is the importance of leveraging Pax8. It's not a tool, but it can help you improve your business. And one way is through integrating your PSA tool with Pax8. So thinking about tool, integrate with Pax8. It's going to streamline everything onto one page, making a lot easier for you. So if you're not integrated with us yet, I highly recommend you do so. Integrate your PSA tool with Pax8. Chris, what's your final thought?
So 3 things come to the top of my mind. I think one is I love the expression, start with why. And I think take that time to understand what you're trying to accomplish, what your expectations are, what your plan is, and build that process around it. The second thing is, I think, just leaning into processes. It's not the tool, right? What both Jonathan said, the tool will exacerbate it. It'll bring out, if it's bad process or if it's good process, it'll make it more of that. And all tools have limitations, and I won't be as extreme as what Jonathan said, but yeah, they all have a level of not so good things about it. And you're really knowing what making the most out of it. And the third thing is really sharpen your axe. Build that time in. I know everyone's busy. There's always the tyranny of the urgent, but to really build in that time and focus to sharpen the axe and make your tools better will pay off in dividends beyond, the 1-to-1 ratio. So those are my 3 thoughts and takeaways from today's episode.
Well, that's amazing. Well, I'll just say thank you again to Johnathan Mack and Johnathan Cox. It was great having you on the show. We all learned so much, so I just really want to appreciate you. Rex, we hope you're watching. We hope you're having a great vacation. Maybe you're watching on the replay. And come back to see us next week. Starts October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we're going to have a little bit of a security theme to our Academy Live sessions. So please tune in every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain. We're on demand always. Chris, you get to close us out.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. And stepping in for Rex today, I really kind of want to ask yourself, what are you going to do differently tomorrow to improve your business? Thanks everybody for being here. Bye. Bye.